Kisyuk Wislam, Kisyuk Kyukit, Kisyuk Quiet, Kapinishkish. Hello, all my warriors out there. Welcome back to another Warrior Wednesday. Today, I want to talk about something that I personally started to do more of during the very beginning of this whole pandemic thing that's going on. And I kind of want to talk about how I actually got into it. So some of you know that I like to live a fairly healthy lifestyle. And at the very beginning of all this stuff that was going on, way back in, is it 2020? Yeah, 2020, I think, is when it kind of all started, around March and April. Well, they shut the gyms down. And then everyone went scrambling to go buy gym equipment, right? So there wasn't a whole lot of stuff left. I lucked out personally, and I ended up getting a pull-up bar and some cables. They're not cables, but rubber bands, which, did a job, did a purpose. It helped me out, and I started to want to push myself. And as a Tunacha man, and my ceremonial name that was given to me, which is Kenshuke Tashmiat, which means night runner. And there's a story behind that name. And I'll share a story about that in another episode further on in life. But I started to want to run more so I could push myself mentally. Because if you've ever ran, even jogged, you know that there's no getting around it. You literally have to be in that exact moment when you're running. It's you versus you when you're running. And it's one of the hardest things that I started to do. And when I very first started running, I was not in running shape. So I had to take baby steps. And what I would do was I had a timer. I had a timer on my, actually I had a Fitbit, but you can do this with your phone as well. But I would just set a timer and I would run for a minute. And then I would walk for 30 seconds. I would walk, just to catch my breath, then run for a minute. And then I would walk for 30 seconds. And I would do that for 20 minutes. And I would do that. I was doing that every day because the gyms were closed. So I just had to push myself mentally, right, to get out there and keep, progressing. Because a stagnant mind will start to cause weeds and grow weeds. And I didn't want that, especially when there was a lot of uncertainty with what was going on in the world at the moment. So I was doing that, and I started to progress a little bit more. I would run for 2 minutes, walk for 30 seconds, and so on and so on. I would do that. And then I was able to run for 5 minutes straight, and then walk for a minute, and then run for 5 minutes straight, and then walk for a minute. Till eventually I made it up to, this was, weeks after, where I was running for half an hour straight. And at that time, when I started to run a little bit more, I was running every second day, because I knew if I overdid something too much, I could get injured. I could hurt myself, which in the long run would be, it'd be worse off than me running every second day and not getting injured, so I could keep investing into myself, right? So I actually started to research on people who started to run every day and what they did. And a lot of people suggested that you stretch every day, which kind of made sense to me. I had to stretch my hip flexors, I had to stretch my hamstrings, my quads, just everything, even my calves. I had to stretch my calves, my feet, so I could stay, loose. And so I started to do yoga twice a day. I was using YouTube. I was just doing, I can't remember any of the names. I just YouTubed yoga, half an hour yoga. So I would do that in the morning. So I would do morning yoga and I would do evening yoga. And I was stretching and running. And I never ended up getting any injuries. Yeah, I never got any injuries. So that's because I was stretching. And then that's what led into my meditation, which you know of from a prior podcast. But one thing I didn't realize when we stretch, I was also doing something else for my mental health that was phenomenal. And I was letting go of stress and past traumas. I was letting that go. I was allowing that to come to the surface. And I was allowing my body to start to heal in a different way that I never knew was possible. And I never realized this. And it even clicked again recently when I was listening to a David Goggins interview. If you don't know who David Goggins is, I highly recommend you check out this man. He's not for everyone. He's definitely not for everyone. But he's living proof on no matter what your situation's growing up in, you can make a change. He is a black man who basically grew up in a town, I guess I'm not too sure if it's exactly where the KKK was founded, but there was a big presence of KKK there, and I believe it was one of one of the very beginning communities. So imagine being one of the only black, people living in a town like this, on what kind of things he went through as a person, as a kid. And his story is pretty powerful. So if you can bear and tone his type of language, he likes to swear a lot. He's military. So he has that military aspect about him. But before he was in the military, his story's pretty powerful. I always love listening to people of all walks of life. It's how I learn. It's how I am able to jump on this podcast and talk about the things I do. And the reason why I talk about what I do is because it's helped me grow through my life and through my situations. And stress. Well, ultimately, if our bodies are always, tight and tense, and we don't stretch ever, we actually stay in fight or flight mode, which will cause more stress, which will cause more anxiety, which will actually age you, which is kind of crazy, right? Like, who would think stretching would keep you younger feeling and would allow stress to leave the body? And stress can do number of things on the body. Stress will create diseases. Stress can create cancer. Stress can do, it'll age you. It's crazy what stress will do to your body. So if you're looking to invest in yourself, which you most likely are because you're listening to my podcast, and you want to become the best version of yourself, and one simple way is to start stretching. You don't have to go all out like I did for a half an hour a day, in the morning and evening. The reason why I was doing that was because we were all stuck at home and I was running every day. So I was trying to prevent myself from getting hurt. I was trying to do all that, but not knowing the benefits of what stretching was doing to me was amazing. And that's another reason why I'm a true believer that everything happens for the right reasons. So what stretching will do will allow your body to relax. It'll allow the muscles to be able to, let go of that stress that we've been holding on to. And people hold stress in different places in their bodies. And with men, they say, men, we hold our stress in our hips, in that area. And women, it's more in their chest and their back. They hold stress in their chest and their back. And there's even been people when they start to stretch, you'll actually cry, or you'll actually feel emotions come up when you're stretching. And just like running, there is no way around stretching. It's one of the most hardest things you could ever do. But, with that comes some of the most amazing benefits that you'll ever receive in life. And that's how life is. The harder you work for things, the more gratitude and satisfied we can feel by taking some action in our life. You can even just start stretching 5 to 10 minutes every day, either, first thing waking up or going to bed. If you're someone who struggles with sleeping, stretching before you go to sleep, it allows your body to wind down. It'll actually signal to your body, okay, it's time to relax. We're not so bound up, we're not so held up, we're not so tight and tense. Just imagine that. Imagine you sitting there trying to squeeze all your muscles all day and then trying to lay down like that. That's why some people struggle with sleeping. And if you want to sleep like a corpse, a corpse lays there motionless. That's what you need to do. You need to start stretching. And stretching is vital. It's very, very vital. And what stretching will do, the benefits of stretching, just what I've listed off, those few things, it actually allows your inner child almost to come out, which is kind of cool because when you watch children, they're playful, they're full of life. And when you start to stretch more, it allows that inner child to come back out. And being indigenous, a lot of indigenous ancestors from Turtle Island, if you look at the old photos and you look at old documentaries on indigenous people, we sat on the ground. We sat next to Mother Earth. We knew that there was a connection to Mother Earth. And you see how they would sit cross-legged. And before I started to stretch, being a male, most men have immobile hips. And that's one of the very first things I actually had to do when I first started working out, was working on getting my hips mobile. And the reason why most men struggle with this is because we're not the same as the women's genetics. The women genetics, they have, if you're a woman, you're a life giver, and it's just genetics that your hips are mobile because that's where you carry life. That's where you carry life. That's where babies sit, is within the hips. So your hips are already mobile. But before I started to stretch, I remember when I was a little kid, I could sit cross-legged for long periods of time. And then I remember before I started stretching, I tried to go into ceremony, and I tried sitting there cross-legged, and it was painful. You know, it really, really hurt, and I couldn't sit cross-legged in our sweat for very long. And after I started to stretch, I can sit cross-legged now. And, you know, I try to, when I'm stretching in my stretching routine, I will actually sit there cross-legged, and I really work on focusing on opening up my hips, because I understand as a man, as a male figure, that's where I carry a lot of my stress. And throughout my healing process, you know, because I'm still not there yet, but I'm further than I was when I first started healing. I noticed if I'm carrying stress and things like that, my hips are tight. They're really tensed up. There's lots of ways to stretch and move, but if you're not stretching yet, I highly recommend that you start stretching. And, you know, you look back on the South Asians, and their spirituality is to do around yoga, you know, and being yoga is more than just, you know, Lululemon pants and having a little yoga mat and being vegan, or, you know, the stereotypical thing. Yoga means to be in union with life, to be in union with everything. You know, you look at indigenous teachings, we had an understanding that everything is, you know, the circle of life. One day, you know, we're here, and there's stories about the animals and how, you know, they came to be, and why, you know, we used the animals the way we did, and how we used every little part of that animal. There was no waste to it. And then when we pass away, we go back into the ground, which we feed the soil, which we feed the bugs, which we feed, you know, the trees, the plants, and everything around it. And then the animals, they eat the plants, they eat, you know, the grass. And the bugs get eaten by more animals, and so on and so on. And that's the circle of life. That's how we're all connected as one. And that's just a brisk story on kind of how everything is connected, you know. So if you're struggling with life and you're struggling with depression or anxiety and things like that, I challenge you to start stretching 5 to 10 minutes every day. Usually when I'm at work, I'm up before I go to work. I work in the trades. I'm a union iron worker. And before I go to work, some of you have seen me on my Instagram stories. I'm in the gym at like 2:33 in the morning. And after I finish my workout, I'll go have breakfast, and then I always stretch. Right after that, after my body's cooled down a bit, I stretch, which allows me to let go of whatever stress I'm carrying. And it even allows my muscles to break down and repair themselves quicker. So, and then I'll meditate right away, because I'm already in that corpse mode, that, you know, the Vipassana, I believe it's called. I've took a few yoga classes, and yoga is pretty intense. So if you think about trying yoga, like in an actual class, it's pretty intense. But if you're feeling these ways, stretching might be one of those things that you never knew that will help you get out of your rut. And I would have never known that if I didn't start running every day and I didn't start, researching how to prevent myself from getting hurt. And that's another thing that goes to show that everything happens for the right reasons. Everything. And we might not see it right now, but eventually we will see it. So I just thought that was kind of cool, and I wanted to touch on that, on stretching. And there's lots of things you can do to stretch. But I just used YouTube because, I have an internet connection and YouTube was there. And it was a really useful tool for me. And then I started to just take bits and pieces on what I really, what was usually more tight for me every day. And I just started to kind of create my own little routine. I have a 15-minute routine that I do now every morning. And there's been a couple of days where, just due to things that came up, I've missed my stretching. And I always feel off. And I can tell it. I don't know exactly what it was when I first kind of missed it the first couple of days. But it was that allowing that being more mindful and letting go of things that I'm carrying throughout the days, throughout those days that prior. It was, that's my time to let go of all that stress. And then meditation even reinforces that. That's another time where I'm reinforcing and letting that stress go. So I really challenge you, if you want to become the best version of yourself, you owe it to yourself to stretch 5 to 10 minutes every day. I challenge you for the next week to stretch every morning and take your time. Don't try to go all out, and if you can't touch your knees, don't try to touch your knees. I recommend that you find a professional that knows what they're doing with yoga for beginners. You can even do what I did. YouTube yoga for beginners. 5-10 minutes. Do it in the morning. Do it at night. I highly recommend doing it in the morning because then you feel amazing throughout your whole day. And at the end of the day, you just lay down in bed and you're just completely wiped because you had an amazing day. And it transfers, into your sleep. So this will be a little bit shorter of a podcast than my past few podcasts. But, to be able to become a warrior, you need to invest in yourself as much as you can. Even if it's stretching for 5 minutes every day. And when you stretch, drink water. Hydrate your body because a lot of us are dehydrated. And I'll touch on that in another podcast about why you should drink more water throughout the day. So Sukani, thank you. On Winnegit, Dagas. And remember, everything always happens for the right reasons. See you next Wednesday.